How early should you start getting ready for your post-PhD career? What is the best investment of your time to optimize your career readiness? Today on the show, I'm bringing you my recent conversation with Claudia Belliveau, a neuroscience PhD currently navigating her transition from academia to the pharmaceutical industry. Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, your weekly inspiration for post-PhD career development. With me, David Mendes. The reason I invited you is that I saw that you're precisely now, in that kind of dark night of how do I find my way to this first job. In your case, it's in pharma. I also know that your PhD is kind of like fresh out of the oven when was it that you defended?
So I defended in March 2024.
March.
Yeah.
There you go. So you're in that first year. And so before we go into that, maybe can you share a little bit about what brought you to science, about what actually made you decide to do a PhD? Because that's also something people who are, let's say, in the first year of their masters and maybe starting to hear about people like going straight, that straight path from first year masters to first year's PhD, they really don't know if it's for them or not. So can you say a little bit about yourself, what motivates you, where does your love for science come, and what your journey has been so far, let's say, academically?
For sure. So it all started, I would say, growing up. I always thought, honestly, that I would be an MD. So, I watched Grey's Anatomy growing up. I have older sisters who were in science, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to be an MD. And then, CEGEP came. So that's like a part of school that's after high school, before university in Quebec. And I didn't have the grades to go to pre-med, which is a program that we have here. So I was like, okay, what now? So I did a bachelor's in anatomy and cell biology, and then I did a minor in psychology. And so that's important because in my undergrad, I took my first neuro class, and then I fell in love with psychology, basically. So kind of the science behind why we are who we are, and psychopathology, why we have these mental health disorders. And so basically, during my undergrad, I started volunteering in labs. I tried different kinds. My first lab, I just entered data for the whole summer in a room with no windows. It was fine, but it was tiring. It was not great. Then I went to a clinical lab where I worked on a phase 4 clinical trial. So basically trying to see if mindfulness was helpful for geriatric patients, so older individuals with symptoms of depression. So we did find that it was, our training program was good. And then I was like, okay, but I'm missing something. I took like Bio 301 at McGill. It's like a 6-hour lab class. And I was like, I kind of like this. So then in my last semester, I looked for another lab, so a wet lab, where I was behind the bench. And that's where I found the lab that I started my master's in. So the Meshwar lab at the Douglas Mental Health University Institute. And so we worked on postmortem human brain. So brains of individuals that died with depression from suicide. And so we got to work with samples of human brain, which was really incredible. Very privileged to have done so. And so I started volunteering there in undergrad for a summer. And then I really loved it, honestly. I loved what I was doing. The lab environment was so good, like it's so collaborative. So I asked if I can do a master's, and my prof was very willing. But I went into my master's saying, I'm never going to do a PhD. So look where we are now. Yeah. So in 2017, I was in undergrad volunteering. And then in 2018, I started the master's. So I was like, I'm just going to do it because I like it. Like, that's why I wanted the master's. But I don't want to get stuck in academia. I want to go to industry. I want to start making money, basically. And then I really had a hard time in my first semester of my master's. I had a lot of impostor syndrome. I really didn't feel like I deserved to be where I was. I felt dumb, honestly, next to everybody that was there. I needed to do a lot of self-work. I went to therapy, did a lot of self-esteem therapy. And then I just kind of was like reading a review one day. and I knew the paper that they were citing. And I was like, whoa, I actually know something. Like, this is crazy. And then my confidence just built, and I wanted to answer questions that I had about my own topic. So I stayed and I did a PhD and I fast tracked.
That is super interesting. And so many of us go through these imposter syndrome moments. And I'd love to know, why, you were really intent and really kind of passionate about going into your master's. What were the elements that were suddenly daunting to you?
Mm-hmm. That's actually a great question. So I would probably say is that you have more I felt like I had more responsibility. So as like an undergrad, I was working on someone else's project. They were telling me what to do. I was just told like, do this IHC, like, so immunohistochemistry, stain this brain tissue, count these cells, so I was like, awesome. I learned stuff, but it wasn't really like I was creating the project. But then, at least in my lab, how it works, it was like, here's your topic. What do you want to do with it? So as like a first year master's, I was like, great question, sir. So I spent like 3 months just reading papers, trying to even decide like what I could research about my topic. So I studied specific structures in the brain called perineuronal nets. And so I had never heard of them before. We never learned about them in school, even in university. So yeah, I think it's just I had to come up with something myself. And I was like, how do I know how to do this? And why does everyone else know how to do it?
That's it. So you had to then dive into it. And then there was this aha moment of reading a review and saying, oh, I know this. I don't need to go explore because this is something I know. And that was kind of the moment where it kind of changed for you. It's very, very interesting because I think it parallels what I think most of us go through, either going into graduate school, because also when you start, there's people who are in their second, third year, and you look at them like wide-eyed and how awesome they are, but also they went through kind of the same in their first years. It's just that you weren't there to see it. But the other thing is that in any professional pivot that you do, you're going to feel that, and it's normal. And of course, historically, even just the term imposter syndrome was developed in studies about women in the workforce. Probably there's more cultural reasons for women to have even a harder time with imposter syndrome. But anyone changing from one space to another, from one organization to another, it's normal to go through them. It's kind of a result of you, I imagine, wanting to perform as well as the people you see around you, and feeling that I don't have all the tools to do it. But the trick is to say, wait, just give it some time and I will have the tools. I have the capacity. I've done the master's and I've done the PhD. Okay, there's a lot of unknowns, but I'm a person who can study and, get all these tools that I need. So be patient with yourself with that. But also something you said, go find help if you need it. And I think, that self-esteem piece that you mentioned. Anyway, my notion based on all these years of talking about the PhD is that graduate school tends to be a place where you are going to have that feeling because of the way it is, because you see people being stellar and publishing, here and there in great journals, and I'm just a little trainee who now started my degree, and oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to. It's easy to go there because of the competitiveness, and because also just the way things are organized. But the thing is, then the years go by, you do the work, looking back and saying how much suffering I imposed on myself just out of comparing and different things that we just do naturally.
Yeah, so I think a huge piece of imposter syndrome is comparing yourself to experience. Like I was comparing myself as a master's student to, like you said, like these third, fourth year PhD students, which, yeah, maybe they're like smarter, but not everyone's smarter. It's just that they have more experience. They've been in this industry longer. They know what they're doing. They made the mistakes already. Like you mentioned, they went through it. So I think that's a lot of, like you said, self-imposed friction. And so a big part of like the self-esteem work that I did like in therapy was CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy. It's just thinking about what's your thought. Is it rational? Are you creating the problem kind of? I'm not saying that people create their own problems, but it's just, are you inflicting even more stress on yourself? And so it's just relooking how you're thinking about the situation. Like, are you really dumb or are you just inexperienced? Like it's just kind of reframing your thought patterns.
That, in a way, I think stems from you wanting to do good, you wanting to perform, and between brackets, as well as what you're seeing around you. So it comes from a good place, but then it can end up being a very overwhelming and very, something that induces very negative feelings. And then it can make you burn out. It can make you stop your project and just leave because you fall into this belief of, oh, I'm not good enough for this. And you kind of extract yourself or exclude yourself from it. So my point, and then coming back to what you said, if you are going through these feelings and you're at university, there are services there that are there for you. I know I use them at the end of my PhD because at the end is always like
it's tough.
It is moment. Tough. But go seek professional help because it will really do something for you that you cannot do for yourself on your own.
I think also like if there's, for example, wait lines to get in with somebody professional, like even just speaking about it within your colleagues, because if it's not spoken about, you think you're the only person that's feeling it. But like you said, every single person has felt it and will feel it at some point when you're new, fresh in the water.
So this was, getting into graduate school, going to graduate school, you've finished, and now you're trying to get into this new. So it's a new space, it's a new pivot, and so it's a moment where you can have these feelings again of being maladapted and having these imposter feelings. But I wonder whether you feel that this work that you've done on yourself before, if it's helping you now, because I imagine it probably does.
Oh yeah. For sure. Like I definitely feel, it's been a rough couple of months. I'll be very honest. Like it's hard. It's hard being like done your PhD and then like, what now? I thought I did everything to avoid being unemployed. I really thought I prepared well for this situation. But anyways, here we are. This is what the situation is. And definitely I'm feeling, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome per se, but something, like maybe did I make the right choice going to grad school? I still think I did, but there's days where I'm like what my friends have been, employed for 7 years now and they're on their third promotion and I'm here, like I can't even get a job, So I definitely think that the work I did on myself in the past is helping me get through this stage right now. I'm definitely not as low as I would have been, for sure. And like I have, I create my own behavioral activation little challenges. So it's just another form of therapy where you make yourself have little wins every day. So literally mine is a little checklist, like take your vitamins, drink 1 liter of water, go to spinning 3 times a week, and you just check it off and it just kind of starts your brain going like, wow, I can accomplish things. So, I have these tools from, my past experiences that I have brought forward for sure.
I love it. I really find that interesting. And maybe this is something that we can share you can share with me that I can put in the show notes. Because I think people get in this rut of, they get into their PhD program and then it's like time flies. There's troubleshooting problems, especially in life sciences. It's the experience I have. The animal model's not working, or some experiment needs troubleshooting that has worked for people across the globe, and then you're not able to make it work in your lab, and that can take a toll on your mental health, depending on how you're built and wired. But it also makes time go super fast until you get to the end. And having these little kind of rituals, habits, I think can help first pace the rhythm at which time stops, because I'm at the lab, time is going fast, but then when I get home I have these kind of tick tock moments of, I can root myself. I can have gratitude rituals, things like that, and kind of ground myself and distance myself from maybe the overly accelerated but also stressful feelings that I can have while I'm at the lab. I love that. Now, you mentioned something, and this is something that I think, again, sadly, is pretty much widespread in the community, which is, oh, I thought I was doing everything right, to then kind of having the getting my degree being kind of a springboard to a readily accessible career path, and it ended up not exactly being that. Can you expand a little bit on what were these things that you thought you were doing right, and you probably were, but they weren't enough? And then what are you not now seeing that are the gaps that you're needing now to kind of in a more focused way work on to make things happen?
Yeah, so I think I'll maybe rewind like mid PhD. So let's say 2021, 2022, where I had just fast tracked into my PhD. Now I know there's only like 3 years left. And I decided that I didn't want to stay in academia and become a professor. I already knew that I didn't want to do a PhD, and that I wanted to go into industry. But like doing my PhD concretized that. I was like, I love research. I don't like the way academia is set up, so I want to go elsewhere. And so then is when I started to look at what can I do? What can I do with this PhD, or what can I do with this degree when I'm done? So that's like 4 years now, like that I've kind of been putting in at least the mental work to start. So I started going to career fairs. McGill has a ton of them, career seminars. I joined, Society for Canadian Women in Science and Technology. I went to networking events. I went to career panels, went to conferences and chatted with like the people at the booths, like not necessarily the scientists, like the people who work in industry. And I networked. I had tons of informational interview in the last year. So from like 2023 to 2024, when I knew I was, finishing, I started already applying to jobs, contacting people cold on LinkedIn, having tons of interviews, informational interviews to say, hey, how did you get to where you are? Or like what skills are necessary? And honestly, that's how C. Belliveau Science was born. In 2022, I kind of said like, okay, I want to go into medical affairs, which a big part of it is communicating, building relationships. And I literally thought to myself, how can I show people that I can do this? And so I started the Instagram. Eventually, I started freelance scientific consulting. And so I really, really thought I had prepared myself to like just, walk into a job. Obviously, maybe that's a little like naive in thinking, but I did put the work in. So at this point, that's what I did. The gaps, I think, is just the time. Like the market's really not incredible. Medical affairs is a difficult department to get into in general, even with experience. So it's even harder without experience. So, yeah.
Hi there. If you have questions and doubts about your professional future as a young scientist, as a PhD, you can now talk directly to me by joining the Beyond the Thesis community on school.com. If you go to skool.com/papaphd, you will find a safe space and a community of people like you figuring out their postgraduate school career journey. And you will have ample opportunity to talk with me directly and ask me your questions on live coffee time sessions and on weekly Q&As. Additionally, you will find courses and also have the opportunity of having one-on-one calls with me. So remember, skool.com/papaphd. See you soon. It's really interesting because you were saying what you did, and I was like, check. You were doing all the right things.
That's what I've been told too.
Yeah,
like, you're doing the right things. I'm like, I know. Okay.
For sure. Like on paper, this is you. I think you mentioned all of the things that I tend to recommend, and so one thing that you're saying is, well, the market is difficult right now. So that's something that's out of your control. The good thing is that you kind of created a business for yourself while you're kind of building the airplane as you were like
taking off,
which is quite amazing. And I'm sure, like, first thing I want to tell you that this is going to pay off in one way or another. Now, the question I have for you is these informational interviews that you were having, were they online? Were they, like, let's say you find someone on LinkedIn and then you do a Zoom call with them? Were they in person? What type of questions were you asking them? You mentioned some, and also of all those conversations, which ones are ongoing still today? Because that's one important aspect of it.
So, most informational interviews, I would say, were online. I think, like, I maybe had like 3 out of, I'm giving a ballpark number here, I probably had like 40 informational interviews. Like, I've met 40 people in pharma, also biotech, like, not just pharma. Almost all of them are online. Whether it's like Teams, Zoom, or like a phone call, even I've had. Even like while they're driving and I'm at the lab and, I was just chatting. Mm-hmm. So I was speaking to, honestly, cold LinkedIn emails. So, like, I would look up kind of the company that I'm interested in, look for their medical affairs team, see if somebody looks like they're engaged on LinkedIn. Like, have they never posted anything? Have they never commented on anything? They're probably not going to want to talk to me. Or, like, that's how I thought of it, So I looked for people who were engaged on LinkedIn, and then I messaged them, a tailored message, not just like, hey, can we chat? It's like, hey, I would need to like look at what I sent, but like, hey, I'm Claudia. I have a PhD in neuroscience. I do this. I have this skill that I really want to bring into medical affairs. Like, can we chat? And more times than not, I get a yes, and we chat. And I've spoken with like CEOs of like biotech companies that just got acquired by a pharma company. I've spoken to VPs. I've spoken to also just MSLs, people in the position I want to be in, managers, all through the industry. And most people are like, yeah, for sure. If I was hiring, we could do something. But obviously they're not hiring when I'm chatting with them. The position opens, but then they want like somebody with 6 years experience, So immediate, I didn't see much going on. It'd be like, oh yeah, I'll refer you here. But then I wasn't done my PhD yet at the beginning, so I wouldn't even get an interview. Now I get an interview with HR, for example, after being referred, but they're like, oh, where's your experience? I'm like, well, you saw my CV. I don't have it. And then I don't get the call back after that, And so I think now, though, I'm starting to see those relationships I built like a year and a half ago, who I message periodically, maybe every 3 to 6 months, just, hey, can we check in? We have like a 15-minute chat. Now they're kind of starting to pay off. I've gotten to like final interview stages now for my dream job at a few companies. In the end, it comes down to I don't either know the therapeutic area or like just the other person does or is already connected. So, but I'm getting closer and I'm seeing the value of all the networking I put in a long time ago.
I love it. So if you're listening, Claudia just shared kind of the blueprint of what I've been telling like for years of Papa PhD. She's doing everything right. Also, she's sharing something which also I've said, which is whenever you're trying to build this village around you, it's not a calculator where you plug in X numbers and then you get a result. You cannot expect a timely result in your time frame that you want. But if you do it like she did, if you do it with authentic curiosity for the people's journey, if you kind of nurture this network of people that now you've started talking with, eventually they become authentic and real relationships, and then some results come trickle in probably at a moment that you're not expecting. But I'm just looking at the camera because I think just rewind and hear what Claudia said, because you are doing all the right things. The thing is, like I was saying, you cannot predict the timeliness of a result. And so it's just a question of patience on your side. Some part of entrepreneurship which kind of is a way of also, well, first keeping your mental health because you're doing creative things and you're getting some wins, like you were saying, and also getting some contracts and making some money. But you really, I think you're really set to, for success in a certain way. And one reflection that I was having was that if the market is difficult right now, one thing you can do is to try and find ways to remove some friction here and there. And I don't know if you're looking for jobs locally, for example, here in Montreal, that's probably it.
Yes, that's probably a little caveat I should mention. I am very much trying to stay in Montreal. Mm-hmm. A few opportunities I have engaged with are in Ontario, thinking about it for a specific role, I would move. But yeah, I am very limited in looking in Montreal, Quebec. So it is something that I also know is like you said, adding friction, but it's still not something that I'm kind of willing to compromise on yet.
That's fine. Yeah. And so one thing that I like to ask you is in this networking effort that you've been like working on and working on very well, I must say, based on what you've said, have you also tried to go on LinkedIn? Because LinkedIn allows you to filter, to do searches and add filters. Have you looked for not the person who has the job that you want, but someone who, let's say, comes from McGill, because it's
segue.
It's a segue. That's it. The removal of friction that I was mentioning. One of the easy ones is, we come from the same university. Hey, I'm maybe even from the same program. But someone who comes from McGill, let's say, for example, or they're from a Montreal University, who is now a hiring manager in the domain that you want. Do you have hiring managers in that network that you've built?
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I have hiring managers that I've interviewed with that have wished me well afterwards, kind of thing. But no, that's a great point. Well, point taken. I'm writing this down.
Well, so that's one advice for you, because I think based on all you've done, I don't know the details, but you now are connected. Let's say in the space that you want to go into, you have good, real, authentic relationships with people who are in there, and these people are probably, if they're hiring or if they're close to the hiring process, they will probably know also the ecosystem of hiring managers around here. And so, because all of this work that I tell people to do to network is, and the way I say it, and it's my way of, I'm very visual in a certain way, and a CV and a cover letter are 2D. You're a 2D candidate, you're on a pile, and you really want to be a 3D candidate. There's different ways. Having kind of social proof of what you do, of your capabilities with your presence on social media, what you've done in terms of entrepreneurship. So it shows also your initiative. But if now you start engaging, of course, you're looking for a job now, so you try to not be transactional about it. But if you start engaging with the hiring managers that are around here and that are hiring around here for the companies that are around us, you'll be more 3D because they'll know people, or there's going to be kind of you've talked with so and so and this. I know him very well, and I've actually brought this many people into their team. So I would add that to your strategy. But the thing, and I just mentioned it, make sure to go about these conversations the same way you did with informational interviews. You cannot expect to, hi, I'm talking with you, can you please give me a job?
For sure, yeah.
That first, it kind of tarnishes the quality of the conversation because there's an expectation, and then there's not going to be a second, third conversation.
And something I could think of that kind of limits the ability to make it transactional is talk to hiring managers who aren't hiring for your position right now, because you can't ask them for anything, I'll also point out, I saw a huge change. So basically, I had applied to like 47 jobs in medical affairs, so all MSL positions, and received 0 messages back. And then I actually really like graciously, because of this Instagram, I got connected with a coach who coaches people to get into the MSL role. And I can share in the show notes after. It's your.msl.coach. And I went through a coaching program where like we went over my CV. We went out, well, resume, whatever. We practiced the interviews. We practiced the panel interview. We practiced, basically everything. And since then, that's where I really saw the change. And like, this is not a paid promotion at all. Like really like this changed everything. The language on my CV like speaks to industry now. And it's, again, something that like I'd shown my CV to every single informational interview I had. And they were like, yeah, looks good, looks great. No problem, send it in. But then I was not getting anything back. But after meeting with Rihanna, I was like, whoa, like now I got HR calls, like almost all the positions. Mostly they say you don't have experience, we're not interested, but still I get calls, So that was really like
super interesting, and I'm really curious to talk about it, and for sure I'll share the link in the notes too. But it's interesting because in my after all these years of Papa PhD and Beyond the Thesis, one of the things that has come up has really to do with that, which is there needs to be, when you're talking with someone in the HR department, the HR manager, or within industry, it's another culture, it's another language, so there needs to be a translation. You cannot just simply take your academic CV, which would work perfectly if you want to go into a postdoc or whatever, and just use that, because it's just not the right language. It's like sending something in German to a Portuguese employer and having them expecting that they will react and that they will appreciate the content. They won't. And in my reflections, one of the things that I want people to start to do is to look back at the very Cartesian, an academic CV is very Cartesian, point by point. I did this, I did that, and I went to this conference, and so it's a very bulleted, kind of cold hard data type thing, which is what we are trained to do. So the way the term I found for it, and that I'm trying to push from my platform, is you need to, once you learn what the culture is, to learn how to do kind of an exercise of strategic storytelling of what you did. You cannot just bring the data. You need to crunch the data, see what's going to be considered fluff by the person you're going to be talking to, and just not go into that. And even that, the things that are going to be pertinent, you need to rethink how you talk about them or how you write them. Is there like one technique or one approach that you can, from this training that you had, that you can share, like for example on changing one bullet in my CV into something that talks to the MSL space, for example?
The thing that comes to mind first is actually my cover letter. So at first, my cover letter, like if I read back my own cover letter, like pre-coaching, I'm like, oh God, like what a dull, boring person, like why would I want to interview this person? Nothing is exciting. But just from being in the coaching program, we went over my cover letter and I made it more of a storytelling thing. So like just for example, let's say the position is in oncology. Why oncology? I was never putting that in my cover letter. I was just saying, I'm interested in oncology. But like, why? Like, I was afraid to put personal anecdotes kind of in my cover letter, but I learned that actually it's quite helpful. Obviously, you don't want to share your entire life, like trauma and experience, but, just a little something about why you're interested in this realm,
You want to be 3D. You don't want to be just 2D.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think I read it, my cover letter now, and I'm like, yeah, I would interview her, And that's like the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, and actually, in academic space, don't even touch. You don't with a 10-foot pole anything personal. It's
So actually, I did, and I got grants from it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, but the traditional way, at least the way
exactly.
I grew up, in the space was, oh no, that's you just need to be cold and
rigid and just get the job done, and that's it.
Maybe things are changing, and that's actually interesting to hear that even for getting grants as a graduate student, having some sort of kind of like science communication, science storytelling, but also storytelling skills is becoming important. I'm really happy to hear that. So one of the things that's super interesting, and again, finding help to learn how to do these things is also something you can and you should do. There's a lot of people out there now in different countries, different continents. I was talking today with someone, PhD from Italy. He's now in Thailand, but he also works in industry, comes from the life sciences, and he is mentoring people to be able to have it an easier path from their PhD to industry, which is it's really, and this is one of the reasons why I do this podcast, is I feel it's unfair to go through this pain after all the pain that you've already gone through to just get the degree. And I think there's more and more out there in terms of even universities or university adjacent organizations or initiatives that are now focusing on helping graduate students or graduates with their degree to prepare while they're in graduate school, and then to have it easier. And of all things, to not get 2-3 years later and you meet them and they say, yeah, well, I got a job, but you know what? I removed the PhD from my CV because
exactly
that is, it's not even, for me, that's even tragic. And
it's
and I hope
sad,
and I hope it's something that I won't hear anymore in a few years. Actually, you know what? Let's make a little break and talk about that, the Notion dashboard thing. Can you just quickly say what that is?
Yeah. So basically, through my struggles of finding a job, I had sort of a process that I've created, a process kind of to how to stay organized during the job hunt, because it is a full-time job. And now, it is my full-time job. I'm a full-time content creator, freelance scientific consulting when I get contracts, and then a full-time job applier. I made a Notion dashboard. It has about 50 practice questions for interviews. So we have behavioral questions, general questions, and then a format for your answer so that you could practice. It has a tracker for your application. So what company, what job, did somebody refer you? Basically everything, the job posting, your tailored CV that you sent for that job, your tailored cover letter for that job that you can upload, as well as it has a networking tracker. So you could put in all these informationals interviews that you have, so that you can know when to recontact them. What did you learn? Where will they refer you? Where do they work? There's a weekly planner so that you could plan your tasks. Like, what are you doing this week? Are you posting on LinkedIn? Are you, applying to 3 jobs, applying to 5 jobs, sending HR an email? And then there is a goal tracker. So you can put in your goals, like, do you want to post 15 times on LinkedIn in the next 3 months? And then you can click a little button that adds and gives you a percentage complete.
Super important.
So so you could find that at my website, cbelliveauscience.com.
Yeah, and I'll of course share that in the show notes for the people who just listen or watch later on. So that's amazing. Thank you. Like, the community thanks you for doing something like this, because it's a very, it can be a kind of a black box for a lot of people, and it can be overwhelming. And to have this kind of structure pre-organized, I really see the potential of helping a lot of people. Now, one of the things that people, depending again on depending on many things, do they have mentors that prepare them? Did their parents already go through it? And there's many ways that people can be ready for what I'm going to talk about, or more ready. but there's always a part of unknown, which is the interview process. And you said that first you've applied to a bunch of jobs that before understanding that needed to be a different way to use storytelling in your 2D application to make it more 3D. There's the aspect of how do I answer these questions? Like, the typical one is, what was a complicated situation that you solved and that you were able to overcome? These types of things. Is it something that first have you had interviews where first you were stumped, and then did you find ways, or did you learn maybe with the coaching how to deal with those? Because they really, it's as if when we come out of a degree like the PhD and we get asked those questions that are so personal and out of left field in a way, they stress us. We start like flop sweat, trying to like maybe over talk. There's so many things that can happen if you're not ready. Have you done any work on that? Have there been questions that you have a before and an after of how you dealt with them that you can share?
Yeah, for sure. So even pre-coaching, I had looked into that because I had in a few interviews before the coaching. But yeah, there's for behavioral questions. So like what you mentioned, where it's kind of like, tell me a time where you had a challenge. How did you deal with it? There's actually like very specific rubric of how you should. How you should respond to these questions, and it's called SPAR or STAR. So situation. So you give the situation, you define like, I was in my PhD, I was working in a lab that had a postdoc and a this, and we had this problem or task to do. And then let's say, I can't think of whatever the task is that was challenging. So we had to make this antibody work in only 2 weeks because we needed the data, let's say. And then what's your action? What did you do? How did you take action? Well, I didn't just sit there and let the postdoc do it. I actually took initiative and I came in extra hours and blah, blah, blah. And I did this. And then what's the result? Well, we not perfectly, but we somehow, like through hard work and tears, we got this antibody to work. And in the end, we were able to present our results at the conference successfully, which led to improvements and scientific dialogue, whatever. So I've been in interviews where they check off boxes. I've not seen the paper, but it's always after I say the word situation, task, action, or result. So, I would say that's something I learned before the coaching, but then obviously got to improve it. And, you don't want to ramble. You want to be concise, but you still want to touch on what's important. So I've heard a lot from informational interviews, from the coaching, from just being around. Academics like to chat. So they can take, tell me about yourself. They can take that into like a 5-minute
when I was
speech.
A kid.
Which is like not necessarily what HR or the hiring manager wants to hear. They want something concise. They want to know you're not wasting your time, their time, the customer's time, the client's time, whatever.
Mm-hmm. So that's super interesting. And it's important to have this framework, and STAR is super easy to remember. But would you say once you learned about that and eventually even improved it, do you have did you go back into your the history into your PhD, even your master's, and did you choose like story? Do you have stories that you already have ready, and what are good stories to tell versus not so interesting stories?
Yeah, definitely. So that's what I call practicing these questions, is like, there's only so many questions they can come up with, right? So if you practice enough, likely you'll be prepared for anything they can throw at you, especially for these behavioral questions. They're all over the internet. I created a page where you can go and practice them. They're ones that I've heard in MSL interviews, for example, as well as things that I've collected. And so, basically, I think any story could work, but what you want to show is that, take the job posting in mind. Do they want the skill of being adaptable? Do they want the skill of being a good communicator? Do they, and like think of stories that would showcase your expertise in that area. A huge question to answer is like, tell me a time that you failed and what did you do? Yeah, like it's fine if you fail. Everybody like reaches failure at some point or like ends up in failure. It's how did you deal with it that's important. At least what I've learned, obviously I'm not a hiring manager, whatever, but this is what I have learned through the process. So it's like, okay, here's how I failed, but here's how I learned from it. Here's how I never made that mistake again. Here's how I improved myself. You leave it on like a positive note. Yes, maybe I lost the company or the lab, like whatever, $10,000 because the antibody was out on the counter. How can I can't change that. That happened, but how can I fix that? Put a system in place so that I have a checkbox in my lab book that says reagents away, something like that. So show that you have a process to fix your failures.
That's a tough one. And that I was going to ask that one because that's one that, especially if it's one of your first interviews, it's really conflicting because you're like, oh, now I have to say something negative about myself, and then it can block you completely. So the idea, if I understand, and it aligns with what I've read and what I've discussed with other people, is yes, know where you failed at something, where something in your purview didn't work as expected. But the most important part is, okay, what lesson did I learn from this? How did I maybe fix the situation? Or, like you said, how did I set up some sort of system to guarantee that? Because people who are interviewing you, they want to know what type of problem solver you are. They also want to know, and I imagine this question also allows them to separate the waters of people who simply say, oh no, I never make mistakes, or someone else made a mistake in my team and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure that's a red flag for them.
For sure. Because if you can't be authentic and truthful, how are you going to be that in the role, right? Like they don't want someone who lies about getting things completed or doing things correctly. So yeah, for sure, you're right.
Because companies, and it's funny because you were talking to me about this like 6-year experience, et cetera, and I keep reading in different places that's their perfect scenario of the perfect candidate that they will receive. And so you shouldn't exclude yourself from a job posting just because it says one or two things that you don't have. But what they do want is someone that is going to be able to work within their team that they already have. So sometimes you're going to be a good candidate, but they know their team, and you're going to you're going to get a no, although you felt things were going well. And sometimes it's simply because there's no fit on that side of things. But one thing they want is coachable people, because my experience working for an agency, for a company, is that then you come in once you get through all of that, you're a good fit. Companies, especially larger companies, they want to train you to their culture, to their preferences, etc. So these behavioral questions also, if you're too rigid, if you are someone who kind of just refuses that they make any mistakes, it's a signal to them this person is not coachable or teachable, so this is not going to work.
Yeah, I would say like most important feedback I've received is like even just talking highly about yourself, for example, or like trying to promote yourself can come across as you're not a team player, So you have to really find like just like I'm still kind of trying to find that middle ground of like, yeah, look, I've done these amazing things, but like also like I'm ready to learn and do whatever you want me to do, like, so yeah, it's just practice. And like you come out of an interview, or at least I do, and like I can be like, yeah, I killed it. But then like 30 minutes pass and I'm like, that question, like, did I really kill that question? Okay, here's how I'll do it better next time. And in my Notion dashboard, I after every interview, I write the questions that I got, because then I can practice them for the next time. And there is a lot of repeat. Yeah, and you kind of have to write it quick or you don't remember.
Because you have all that adrenaline and anxiety, and then it leaves your mind, your short-term memory. Yeah, it's really super, super interesting that this last thing that you said, which is whenever I finish an interview, I'm kind of rehashing it and thinking what went wrong. First, I have maybe the feeling of, yeah, this went great, but then I'm like, maybe I could improve here or there. And this leads to an important thing. And it is that as the same way as your networking efforts, you cannot expect specific and timely results out of something that's made of humans that are, there's so many variables out there. Same thing with a job interview. Unless you are in a super last stage, you've went through different hoops and you went, you flew to go to the lab, and there you're probably expecting to get the position. But where I want to go with this is, and this is an error that I remember doing in my first interviews, thinking, I hope it's this one, I hope it's this one. Go into it, well, hoping for a positive outcome, but there's different things that are positive outcomes. Learning that, the culture of this company actually isn't for me. That's a positive outcome for me. Knowing that, okay, I'm probably not getting it, but also I didn't get a good feeling for myself of what this is. 2, improving your interview game, like you said. Like I think it's like athletes do this, right? They play a game, they lose, they win. They go back, they watch the video, and so do the same for yourself. And my take-home message with this about interviewing is, if you don't put too much expectation on the result of this specific interview, you're more relaxed. And then one thing you can guarantee is, you've gone through a PhD. Learning is what you do, like crunching data and understanding patterns. So after an interview, always try to take stock of what happened. Try to remember, when did people kind of, their body language felt positive or not, and think, okay, here maybe, and then they'll go use your Notion page. Okay, this I think I can improve. This story, or the way I use the STAR kind of method here, I can kind of fine tune it. And this means that each interview you're having is getting you closer to the one where you get the job, because you are improving all the way. I love it.
And it's not the mentality I had going in, like the first interview was, so my first almost successful, where I got to the final stage in a pharma company, it was for project manager. It was 11 days before my PhD defense. I was going to the final interview and I was like, oh baby, I'm going to get this job. I'm going to do exactly what I wanted. I'm going to get this job, finish my PhD, and boom, boom, done, and now I'm in. I did not get the job. And I was crushed, crushed. And I didn't I'll be honest though, nothing was wrong with my interview. It was just, they chose somebody else. That's what they told me. But it's just the mentality going in. After the first interview, for example, I was like, oh yeah, I killed it. This question, if I don't get it, it's probably that question. But in reality, it has nothing to do with that question. It's the overall experience.
Yes, so much data they're trying to extract out of that conversation that if you relaxed, I think it's also something that is going to leave a better feeling to them.
So, and then more recently, I'll just share I had two interviews, same day, one at 9 a.m., one at 10 a.m. Okay. One was for the position I wanted, and one was for just a position in the company, basically, in a different company. And the first one is the one that I really prepared for, because it was an MSL position. So that's what all my focus was on, and then I killed the second interview. Because I was I hope they're not listening, but I was like, I don't want that job really. Like, I'll just do it if I get it because it's in pharma, it's in the whatever, the department and blah, blah, blah. And then I got the second job. So I got a job. I declined it because the offer was not good. I would have to move to Ontario. I would not be able to pay rent. I was just like, not going to work. But I learned a lesson. I was not stressed about that interview at all. And I got a job. And then I felt like a dummy because I didn't get the other job. So I was like, oh, I said no to a job and I didn't get the other job, but it's okay. I have time.
Well, it's amazing because it kind of shows how random this reality is. It also has to do with the fact that like you said, the market is not at its easiest. But there is something there, which is being relaxed makes you a better looking, a better sounding candidate. And a lot of the interview process has to do with, like I mentioned before, how is this person going to fit into my team? And a lot of that is, what's the rapport I can develop in this half hour with this person, how comfortable they are, how, if you are, if like sweating, stirring out of nervousness, etc. That's not going to put them at ease in terms of, okay, this person's going to integrate into the team and that's someone actually I want, because you're going to be their colleague eventually. Because I remember in my interview processes, there was someone with HR was one interview, but then there was interview with team members, and there the importance was to be relaxed and to show, hey, I can be one of you guys. Yeah. You can have me as a colleague. How cool would that be, right? And the being relaxed is definitely part of it. Now I know also that, and I'm an introvert mostly. I don't know where in the introversion extroversion spectrum you put yourself, because we didn't have that conversation. But people might not expect it because I'm doing this podcast. But yes, I'm an introvert, and I would even say back, like I was still in Portugal, the first interview I did, I was even shy. I was like, oh my God, I need to talk to these people that I don't know. And I was like super nervous. And of course I didn't get it. But now thinking about it, I was kind of inflicting that into myself out of just the fear of the unknown. And so that takes me to preparation, which is something you have done a lot, and which is something I know is going to bring you somewhere you're going to be happy. And it's hard to get a rejection, to get a no each time. I don't think
it's a lot.
I don't think as humans, being rejected is to the extreme. If you think of tribes, etc., it's like saying someone telling you, okay, we're really putting you outside of the tribe now. Bears and saber-toothed lions can eat you, right? And we really don't like it. But if you think of the interview process, especially coming out of academia and going to this new space, allow yourself for these 6 months, 9 months, a year to say the no's that I'm going to receive are like the steps of this ladder to yes. So just to kind of relax and not take it personally. And then if you need to take kind of a more like menial job to pay the bills, and not everyone has the entrepreneurial like fiber, or to create your own business, do it, because we're humans and we live in this society and we need to be active in that way, and we have to. But I really think that if people do what you did very well, I think less and less people will be in the situation that I know still exists today of, I removed PhD from my CV, from my resume, because I was hearing the word overqualified way too much, and it was hurtful. And now often they're like resentful of the choices they're made. And I do think that is tragic. I think there's a lot of value in this community of people who go through this ordeal of the PhD. There's a lot of organizations, and I know it, like governmental organizations local community organizations dealing with difficult issues, industry who needs R&D to flourish, etc. They need these brains. They need the people who want to think about tough questions for a long time. Of course, in industry, it can be too long without an answer, or else we switch projects. But that's okay.
Yeah. I love that part of industry, though.
But that's it. There's a reason why, right? This conversation has really kind of given me this very good feeling of, okay, there's proof that things work. Of course, there's also proof that, like I've been saying again and again, you cannot expect results exactly when you want them, but if you do the right things, step by step, you're gonna get closer to it. Now, one thing that it's tough to talk about is, I'm going to take the liberty of taking a few minutes more, and it's kind of the next step. And I know you've been there because you've said you rejected an offer. I think because partly of that is pay. So one of the things that I feel should change about the whole PhD experience is that we're kind of trained, just because of the way things go day to day, to devalue our time, especially in our domain. In our domain, how many people I saw spending nights and weekends at the lab because my cells need splitting, because my mice need tending, because whatever. And so once that's the culture, which is if you've done all your work, you're receiving this money, but the time that you spend, there's kind of an infinite amount of an infinite range of how much your time at the lab can expand with the same pay. And so often what happens when we go in, and this happened to me, is that you're not good at negotiating salary. Is this something that, and this I think would be maybe the last thing we talk about, is this something that you have covered in the way you've prepared yourself? Did you have mentorship on that? Because this is something that really people are very often not ready for. And then they also end up in situations where they feel that they're not remunerated at the level that they expected after all these years of study. What are your thoughts on that before I kind of try to give a little summary of our conversation?
Yeah. So I think I'll first start with, I completely agree with you that we as academics have learned to devalue our own time, which I think is a huge problem, because moving forward, we are more willing to take these jobs that, I'm not saying they're not for us, but it's just like we did extra work for a reason, like we put in extra 7 years, and people think, oh, you're a student. Yeah, I'm a student who runs my own project, who trains people, who manages a budget, who, I had a job. I was in class for 3 hours a week for 3 semesters. The rest was me developing my own things.
Yeah, and it's not Klondike. The funding you get allows you to pay your anyway.
Yeah.
It's not the same as stopping at the masters and then starting to get
to work. Exactly. Yeah.
But I'll let you continue.
Yeah. And also just fun fact, my dad did his PhD at McGill. I think he graduated in 1976. Okay. Guess what his stipend was?
I have no idea.
20,000 Canadian dollars. I did my my PhD at McGill. Just graduated. What was my stipend when I started? 20,000. Were you expecting that? So not $1 of change. But we know how inflation works. We know how 20K now is nothing near 20K in 1976, Also, sorry, Dad, if it's the wrong year, but I'm pretty sure it's 1976. Okay, anyways. So yes, I think that's very important. I read books. So one of the books I can remember right now is called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I think he was a CIA agent, and it's a book about negotiating. So he was talking about negotiating with hostage situations, so much more high stakes, but it relates a lot to negotiating for jobs. So I have not yet been in that situation. I tried to negotiate for the job that I got. And they were just like, no. I was like, okay, so never mind. I'm not going to take the job. But anyways, but in terms of as an entrepreneur, I negotiate all the time. So when, companies reach out for sponsorships for my social media, or when I'm negotiating contracts with clients for my freelance work, it is a lot of negotiating. So am I a pro at it? No, I don't always get like what I set out to get, but a lot of the times I'm like, well, I kind of just need money, so I'll still do it for less money than it's worth, So I think I still have that like academic mindset. And I'm also just like, trying to figure out what life is like as an adult outside of academia. So, it's okay if I don't know it 100% now. But I definitely think it's a skill that you have to practice. Yeah.
So, and would you recommend going to platforms like Glassdoor so if you're interviewing for a position, to at least have a ballpark idea of what the market is? Like for example, as an MSL, do you have a kind of an interval of pay ranges that makes sense, or pay ranges that are like too low? Like, do you have this number or this range in your head when you're going into an interview?
So what I was actually taught through the coaching is, yes, have a benchmark. So do your research, like either speak with people who are currently in the position, maybe not the same company because it's a bit weird, but like, just generally in your informational interview, sometimes people are willing to discuss it. And it's actually like, which is something I use with my clients too, is like, I'll just be like, hey, what's your budget? Obviously not in those words, don't say it like that. But, like, I understand companies have, different ways of benchmarking their candidates. What do you think would be an appropriate range for this role? And then usually they'll tell you like something. Maybe it's not an exact number, but they'll give you like a range of like 30K, which is like, that's a pretty big range. But yeah, like MSL jobs some have like the number on the posting, and from Glassdoor and stuff, like I'm expecting, at least with no experience, hopefully like around 110 or something like that is what I'd be interested in. I have seen some postings like 130, but like would I qualify for that with no experience?
It's probably something you evolve towards, but anything around or above 100, I think is something that would be very pleasing and I think appropriate for all these years of study. But I think probably because I went into medical writing and it was under the 60K. But I think I wonder, and I need to go see what the market looks like today, because I think 80 something could be.
I think medical writing still around like 65, 70 from the positions that I've applied to anyways.
Yeah. So it's evolved just a little bit, but it shows that depending on what you want to do and what position you're looking at, you'll need to try to learn what this range is, so that you're not overshooting it by too much, and then they say, sorry, we cannot hire you, but also not underselling yourself. And so the message from me is, you are valuable. You may have things to learn whenever you get into a new entity, a new company, a new department. There's things you need to learn. If you go to industry, there's onboarding, there's a lot that you will learn, but learning is what you do. So don't worry too much about that. Be confident on the potential you have to bring value to the table to these people who are considering hiring you. So don't be timid about maybe an amount that's way higher than what you were getting during the PhD. We need to be, as citizens but also as scientists and as academics, we need to be able to pay our bills, have our life projects, and so you're justified to expect a remuneration that is enough for your needs. And people's needs are different, but I think accepting something, and that has to do with that question of, oh, I want this one to be the one, I want this one to be the one, may also lead you to accept conditions, be it salary or other, that are really not aligned with your values and with your projects. So, and be careful to get into a relationship, because these in the end are relationships that is going to be toxic to you somehow, or that you'll regret. So, yeah, try to be to have the information before you go to the interviews, and yeah, be how can I say, be flexible in a certain way, but also be cognizant of the fact that the way you were paid while you're in graduate school is not an example of anything that makes sense once you're out.
Absolutely. Agreed 100%.
Claudia, it's been great. Time has flown, but it's been a really, really great conversation. One thing that I want to remind people of is that Claudia has this website, cbelliveauscience.com, where she has all these resources, including the Notion dashboard that I'm going to go look at, because I think it's really, really interesting. Plus other resources that she's worked on for the community, which I think is great. But if there's one thing that you take from this conversation, it is preparation is the key. So I know I really didn't really prepare until I was kind of, I jumped off the plane, and then I pulled the string, and then the parachute opened, and then I was trying to see where I landed. And Claudia has shared with us all she has done throughout her graduate school journey, and she also shared with us that she couldn't really predict or have the results she wanted exactly when she wanted, but she's now seeing the results of this kind of long-winded investment of time, because this is time. Having informational interviews, connecting with people on LinkedIn, doing all you've done on that side, it's time. And if you use the tools that she developed and are able to create a habit of doing it, and then not having to question it, because one thing I didn't ask you was, how often were you doing this, and how were you making it a habit of, okay, I need to meet another person, because that's something that's challenging for people. It's like, I'm doing a PhD, I don't have time for anything else. Was this something like every evening, or I don't know? Cause some people are kind of early birds.
Yeah.
Some people.
Definitely, it was. Depends the time of the year, but when I had time, like I would be messaging at least like 2 days a week, 2 people, kind of thing. Because that's a lot too. Like then you have to schedule with them, and then that's like a chunk of time. And yeah, I was taking calls like during incubations, for example. I would go into the conference room and set up Zoom at lunchtime, whatever. So I wasn't sure what my schedule was. And like this Notion dashboard, honestly, I put in like a thing, like message 3 people per week, like you can put in a goal and so you stay on track. So I think it's just having those processes set so you can stay on track for what you want.
So yeah, it makes total sense. And so this also means that sometimes time is there and you just don't see it, like an incubation time. Maybe in 20 years earlier, you'd be out smoking a cigarette, and now we've kind of thankfully passed that era. Well, you know what? You can do some, you can put some tiny amount of work into this networking aspect of things, which I think you did really good. And I'm sure, and you've told us that results are coming out. It's just they didn't come as fast as you thought. But again, it's not something we can predict. Claudia, this has been really great. I think you have the right instincts. The other aspect that I think is really important about what you said, had to do with the fact that at a certain point you didn't have the wherewithal within yourself to get out of a certain pattern of thinking, and you went to look for professional services for that. Do that. If you are in graduate school and you love your project, you love the idea of doing science, but something in terms of mental health is not working, go find help. And that can lead to you solving things and keeping going on, or solving things and deciding, you know what, actually, the PhD is not really the place where I should be. And that's a good outcome too. And I've recently had an interview about that. And it's important to be aligned with your life goals. And sometimes you kind of follow this pattern, like, you know, like the fast track, et cetera, that kind of brought in this torrent of in this inertia of academic achievement. And then you're like, oh, why am I here? And so
how did I get here?
How did I get here? So that could be an outcome too. And it's not failure. It's just you reorienting your life to do something fulfilling. Anyway, thank you so much. Your journey is inspiring. I think you're doing all the right things. That maybe like I said, there's some little tweaks here and there that I suggest, like, but I'm really happy that you were able to come here today to share this, because I feel that this episode is like a blueprint for anyone who's now in graduate school. I think not everyone goes through life the same way, so you don't need to become Claudia Belliveau, but there's a lot of elements there that if some of them resonate with you, take them, make them your own, and move forward towards a smooth transition. I really wish that, and I'm seeing your smile, and I'm seeing how thinking of this is not kind of say there's no like resentment or anything. Even all the difficult parts, because you've worked through it, and you know that you're kind of putting, like, brick by brick, you're building something that's going to give a result. So yeah, thank you so much. It's been really, really great having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. And some days are hard, but I have the tools to work through it, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you for listening to episode 26 of the 6th season of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. This week with me, David Mendes, and my guest, Claudia Belliveau. Have a question about this interview? Want to leave a comment about the podcast? Have someone you want to recommend to be interviewed? Go to speakpipe.com/papaphd and leave me a voice note. Just hit the big record button and leave me an up to 90-second message. I listen to all my messages and I consider all of them for feature on future episodes. speakpipe.com/papaphd. Hope to hear from you soon.